Information to help you run your business better and improve your marketing campaigns. My name is Hank Hoffmeyer, and thank you for joining me on Hank's Marketing and Business Tips. Welcome to episode 249 of the Hmbt podcast. I'm joined today by Trisha Lewis. She is a coach, speaker, and fellow podcast host. Check out the Make It Real podcast. I'll have links in the show notes. But more importantly, Trisha is a communications expert. If you want to become listened to more and have people engage with you, especially in conversation, and more importantly, trust you and interact with you more, you want to listen into today's episode. Trisha, I appreciate you joining, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Well, so do I, Hank.
Awesome. Look at that. See, right off the bat, communications right there.
Snappy. I thought, keep it snappy, Trisha.
So let's jump right in. Since you're a communications expert, when it comes to like professionals, a business person, salesperson, whatever you want to call it, business owner, which a lot of my audience are business owners, what do you feel they struggle with when it comes to communication?
Right. Obviously, huge thing, communication. And I'll tell you what I struggle with, and that is trying to be succinct when I'm describing the work I do and why I do it and all the rest of it. But let's give it a go. So I'm going to just have in mind a few clients I've worked with recently, and there's quite a variety. So I work sometimes with people who are actually employed. It's not just small business owners, although mainly. And for them, it's things like having their voice heard in meetings. Okay, so they have the ideas, they have the opinions, they are fabulously lovely people, but they are kind of lovely and therefore don't push themselves because they don't want to come across as pushy or bossy or opinionated or showing off or whatever they've got in their head that they think they might be judged as. I'm going to have to bring up the gender thing here, although I always sort of resist that a bit because I'm very interested in just humans, really. But there is no question that women do perhaps overthink, shall I say, how they're going to be judged. And before they know it, the moment has gone and somebody else has come in with the idea and they're thinking, I don't know what to do. So that's one. And then equally, of course, that can happen with a small business owner. It's really a very similar thing because they're just kind of lacking that sort of sense of being more assertive, say at a networking do or something like that, because they, again, are probably overthinking. They don't want to come across as too slick or sort of too quirky or whatever it is that they're kind of oscillating between, well, if I'm too much me, that might be a bit scary. If I try and be a bit more professional and business-like in inverted commas, maybe that's how I have to be, but then they don't get heard because they're not being themselves.
Right.
And so they get stuck in this kind of limbo land where they're just going along being incredibly lovely listeners, slipping slightly into the people-pleasing territory. So really, if you like, the common theme in all of that is, and that's one aspect. The other aspect is to do with clarity, really basic stuff to do with clarity, knowing how to wrap up a conversation, knowing how to listen and then kind of check for understanding and all that stuff that creates more clarity in a situation. So in all of this, it's often to do with balance. It's often just to do with bringing sort of a bit more of the strong stuff up, a bit more of the warm stuff up, getting to know when you can tweak this and that. And it's fun. You can play with communication.
It sounds like you really know how I used to be the old Hank, because you just described me to a T. Years ago, I used to be afraid of not being succinct, like you said, because I theoretically would verbally vomit on people because I was passionate about what I was talking about. And then I didn't want to speak up in meetings because what if I'm wrong? Or what if I'm saying the wrong thing? What if I'm not correct? What if my idea is not good enough? And I just learned, speak up, and you start learning how to communicate better, at times. Okay, well, don't say the silly things anymore because they're silly and nobody wants to hear those. Well, actually that slips out every now and then, but yeah, I think it comes with practice and confidence. At networking events, I've always been like, okay, it looks like everybody's either paired up with one or more people. I don't want to interrupt anyone. I don't want to interrupt the conversation. Then it's the whole thing of when do I get to butt in? And then how do you end it if somebody keeps talking? And there was a great video I watched, and I forgot a few of them, but one of them was like, oh, Trisha, that was really awesome. So if I had to really put this in a nutshell before we move on to the next topic, was you said, and that kind of tells them that you want to move on from that, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting you say, how do I butt in? You said that
Yeah.
in your lovely American way there, Hank. And please, Trisha, do not try and put on an American accent. So this is great because people are quite often surprised that I have a little bit of introvert in me. I've got extrovert in me. I can do ambivert quite well, therefore. But I do get the whole sort of slightly introvert thing. So going sometimes into those networking events, I have to kind of take a deep breath and think, get myself into the right mood and put the inner smile in, before I walk in, and a little bit of a power pose to make myself feel, but then just try and relax and I often use humor because it usually works. And well, it does, it's just human, and
Right.
people respond very well to that kind of, I don't mean humor as in I'm going to tell you a joke.
Did
I
you hear the
mean
one
just,
about
yes, did you know the one? So this is how you butt in, everybody, at a networking event. You say, hey, did you hear the one? No, you don't do that. What you do is things like real honesty. So you're stood there and there's a couple and you just say, by the way, I'm just going to stand here for a bit and look like a bit of a lemon because I'd love to chat.
I like
And
that.
sure enough, that worked. I mean, why not?
Yep.
That's honest. And I tell you what, listeners, if those people do not respond and they go back into their clique and start chatting, just move the heck on, because
Yep.
then they are actually not worth talking to.
Right. Well, what it comes down to is it's a networking event. And what are people there to do, right? Network.
Exactly.
A lot of times there are people that if it's an ongoing networking event, like monthly, people will know each other and they got their cliques, like you said. But I go over and stand there. I don't interrupt if they're talking. If it's two people talking, I wait for that gap and I just say, hey, just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Hank Hoffmeyer. I work with J2 Global. Just wanted to learn a little bit about you both. And like the second or third time I did that, it just started to become habit, and I felt better because each time I did it, it was well received. They didn't say, well, we're having a conversation here, you should have stepped in with a joke. No.
No, I honestly, honesty and straightforwardness, that's the way to go. And it seems so obvious when you say it like this, but honestly, I do get it. I really do get it. And what I think I come back to is what we said, we just overthink everything. And you've got to say to yourself, what's the worst that can happen, really? And if they go all funny and they're sort of offish, then you have to say, well, that, to be honest, I think that's their problem, because like you said, we're at a networking event. So yeah, and the same applies, I guess, in a meeting. What's the worst that can happen? You can, that's the other thing, is avoiding using all that kind of slightly hedge language, as it's called. And it is a rather female tendency as well, but I'm sure blokes do it too, where you kind of come up with this, I hope you don't mind me saying, and I don't really want to interrupt, but well, this probably isn't important, but, and all those kind of phrases. And you're actually
Yep.
sending an internal message back to your own brain that makes you feel less assertive and stupid. So it sort of has a knock-on effect. And yeah, that's something Do you know what I love doing most with clients, Hank, and I do it a lot, is a sort of role play thing. And
Love role playing.
people get freaked out about it because they've somehow gone to some strange impro class or something, and they just kind of think, oh, I'm going to be made to be a dog or something, and you know, and actually all I do is I usually take on the character of the person that they want to be able to communicate well with. So I take a brief from them, if you like, and I just sort of put myself into that situation. They, 9 times out of 10, are just being themselves. So it isn't
Right.
that freaky at all. But we instantly get into it, and it's literally like rehearsing a conversation, rehearsing a networking chat, rehearsing, well, obviously we can rehearse talks and presentations, but that kind of backwards and forwards conversation,
Right.
you very rarely get a chance to rehearse that. And that, like you said earlier on, you just keep practicing, you know.
Right. And you mentioned something, and it's kind of like you were saying, like almost being passive, like using terms like should, would, could. I used to do that in webinars. I would say you should be using better subject lines where I'm the expert. I should be saying you have to use more impactful subject lines. Therefore, if you're, say, in sales, an account manager, or even an entrepreneur, and you're looking for funding, you can't go into a meeting asking for, $50 million, saying, well, we're looking into possibly, maybe we should enhance our product by. You have to say, our users are clamoring for this great new feature, and we want to implement it by September 1st. That $50,000 that you are going to give to us, and maybe not that bold, but that
You've gone a
$50,000
bit
that
too far there,
you would
no,
end up
you're
giving
right.
us is going to
Yeah,
help us do that. And then we're going to have a return on investment. You need to be
yeah,
more confident.
yeah, you do. And the thing is, it literally, like I said, it's this fabulous knock-on effect, because you then send the signals back to your own brain and you just feel more confident. It's like I said about getting this smile into your whole kind of body before you walk into these spaces. It's not a clever little gimmicky trick. It's scientific, you know, because you try it. I think there's somebody, I think it's Daniel Kahneman in a book, Think Fast and Slow, I think it's called.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, do you know? Yeah, he goes on about system 1 and system 2, intuition and rational thought. Brilliant. Really recommend it. But he has this little trick where he says you put a biro in between your teeth, and you turn yeah.
Yep. I heard that one. Yeah. And it
And
also
what you've
helps
got
you with
here,
your
what you've got here is
enunciation.
actually a real smile. And in fact, once you've got that, you try feeling miserable or low or useless. It doesn't happen. You have sent the signal to your brain. So
Right.
these things this is the thing about communication skills. I think you get a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not a very natural communicator, or, oh, I can't do public speaking. And, you know, I'm just going to get really strict with those people, because it's a skill. And hey, you know, like you learn how to ride a bike and stuff.
Yep.
This is what we do.
It's
We
like a muscle. You
practice.
have to exercise it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you can't do role playing, like if you don't want to get on Zoom with somebody because of the pandemic and do a role play, if you feel silly, just record yourself, communicating or giving a pitch, and then go back
Yeah.
and watch yourself. Well, did I feel confident? Like you said, did I smile? Look at those cues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I call it, you know, Toto, the little dog in Wizard of Oz.
Right.
So I've decided that stands for try, observe, and that's what I
I
do a
love
lot
it.
with clients, you know, and I get them to use their voice recorder on their phone and do little pitches and things on there, and then play them back. And apart from anything else, you then get to figure out, you know, when you're trying to get that perfect, nice little introduction for a networking
Right.
event,
I think
if
we
you
just
do
had
that,
a show title, Harness Your Inner Toto.
yes. I do come up with some quite cute little phrases. I've got a few, and one of them is vulnerability weaving. I'll just tell you quickly what that is, because it's a really useful thing. And when it comes, this would actually come into all sorts of areas of communication. Everybody's been told, be authentic, be vulnerable, be real. Okay, now I'm totally up with that, because it's really at the core. It's one of my sort of core missions. However, I am not up for just telling people to just be you or whatever, because that's rubbish. What you want is tactics, techniques, practice, experimenting, exploring. You can't just go out and say, oh, just be you, for goodness sakes. Not
Well,
helpful.
I holistically believe there's the you in pajamas and then there's the you in business clothes. I mean, it's slightly different.
Yes, tweaking. I call it conscious tweaking. There you go. There's
Yep.
another one of my phrases, conscious tweaking. And that's why I talk about the strong, warm balance, and this vulnerability weaving is another form of balance. So when you're in conversation and you're getting to know someone, you're building rapport, or when you're doing this in a post or an article, yes, get some of this personal stuff in, but weave it in a very, very sort of resonant and relevant way to the other person, to your business, to what's going on around you. So you don't just vomit all your history and personal life all over. You used the word, you said verbally vomit earlier.
Yeah.
So
Let me start when I was born in 19.
Yeah. I mean, it's really essential that you show the human part of you and that you share some stories, but you can always find a link to something somewhere that's going to interest that other person, that will resonate with them. There's something connected with what's going on around you, or the news, or anything, and somewhere in there there'll be a sneaky little bit of you stuff that you put in there, and just tempt them to actually want to know more. That's
I've been a speaker for years, and to be honest, I'm still working on weaving in my stories, right, and making them succinct, have clarity to them, and then also I always forget, it's about them and not me, right? Like you said, it's not the whole story about me, but it's a story, and how can they relate to that? Oh, that happened to me, or oh, I can relate to that. Like maybe they don't have a cat, like if I have a cat, but they can relate to it. Like generalize it to be like a pet in a way that just happens. And I'm still working on that, but that's why people like you exist, right? Because we can work with you to become better. And I've mentioned numerous times in numerous episodes, if you want to get better at something, you need to have a coach, you need to have a mentor, because there's no way to get better than to work with somebody who's better at something than you are. There's a gentleman I follow, Peter Vood. He's a speaker, but he also talks to people about becoming an entrepreneur and leaving their current job and starting their own business. He says, if you want to become a millionaire, hang out with billionaires, you get there faster, which I love that phrase.
I work with, of course I work with, like, for me, it's things like marketing, and I'm working with a book coach at the moment. Oh, there's a bit of just a quick plug. Yes, I've got a book coming out early next year that will be very much in line with my, here we go, Hank, with my TEDx talk that I'm doing early next year.
Awesome. Congrats.
Yay! So it's a very exciting 2021 coming out. But of course I'm working with people on, and in fact, even for the TEDx talk, I will be getting the support of a speaker coach, although I am a speaker coach, because I need the objectivity, and I would never, I mean, for me, it'll be the first TEDx I've done. I've done thousands of speaker engagements, but this is the first TEDx, and there's a very specific sort of set of things you need to get in there for a TEDx in terms of their sort of concept. For me, the whole joy is that it's a new challenge, and I'm going to be challenged. So yes, of course I want to learn and work with people. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your podcast, because I'm intrigued to learn about that, and I want my listeners to find out more. And then obviously tell us a bit more about the book.
So the podcast, the Make It Real podcast, I just came up with that phrase really quite easily. It's not, because it just sort of, real is a word that I use a lot, and it just felt right. So the concept really was that I would be interviewing people, mainly small business owners, although actually every now and then there'll be an author, or just an industry expert, or just a fascinating person with a story to tell. But the idea is that they're kind of sharing experiences, insights, sort of to give this kind of motivation and sense that, oh, look, they're a real person. Oh, they messed up as well. And they're not sure how to do that either. But oh, look, but they really know about this because they learned about this. And you don't have to be this in order to be this. So it's kind of real all the way through. And so people like it because it's got this mix of, there is some storytelling in there, but then there's some really practical tips. I have very generous guests who end up giving the most amazing tactics and tips away in my episodes, along with all this lovely fun and story and fascinating experiences too. So it's that. It's as simple as that, and it's
Sounds like it's very complimentary to my episodes, and I think that they should subscribe to your podcast, and then don't unsubscribe from mine, but keep them both, listen to them both, because I think you're going to learn a lot of real world tips and stuff and information from me, and real world stories and how to learn from failure, I guess is what I'm getting, from some of the stories that come out of your podcast, which sounds great. People check it out. Link will be down in the show notes and go from there. But let's hear more about this book.
Well, the book is so exciting because, people say, I'm going to write a book. And then 3 years later, yes, I'm going to write a book. I thought, come on, this is it. I'm getting on, Hank. So I can't mess about. so I had written almost an entire book, and it was around the theme, if you like, of imposter syndrome.
Right.
But I knew, instinctively, my gut, my instinct said, no, this isn't quite it. I've still got it in a big file and it's got useful material in it, but no, it's not, something's not quite right. And I developed my ideas around imposter syndrome over a few years. And then I suddenly clicked on a particular area of all this that doesn't get talked about so much. And in a way, it is this kind of fear of being judged as a show-off. Okay, and I've kind of alluded to that through some of these conversations. It's somehow thinking I can't get out there as my full self because people might not like me. Or that's not professional, or whatever. Okay, so I've worked around about 7 or 8 different ways that this manifests itself. And I've created cases, if you like, which are these stories that these clients share with Investigator Lewis. Now, for anyone who doesn't know me, Investigator Lewis is a sort of alter ego of mine, and she crops up every now and again in little videos on LinkedIn. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find Investigator Lewis cracking communication crimes, basically.
Love it.
Yes, in the trilby and the shades and the trench coat. And so when I first worked with my book coach, I said, I'd quite like to bring this character in. What do you think? Shall I do a little bit at the end of each chapter? And she said, no. She said, you're going to go full in with this, Trisha. You're not messing around. So actually, each one of these chapters is Investigator Lewis has a client come to her who then describes the problem, okay? Investigator Lewis, there's also quite a lot of lovely humor in it and storytelling, but yet there is a definite real problem. Of course, each one of these is being taken from my experience, the experience of my clients, the experiences I've heard from people in conversation. So they are very real. And then I have a colleague called Professor P, who has all the science knowledge, all the research knowledge. So I take my notes to Professor P, who studies them and then comes out with some real research and theory and psychology stuff, but again, in a very story forming conversation with Investigator Lewis. And then at the end, I wrap it all up by then being able to go and write my report, my recommendations. And we end each chapter with crack your own case, which is basically an exercise to do to progress your own sort of work on this stuff. So it's completely quirky. It's totally different. It'll be, it's about 40,000 pages long. So it's not a sort of giveaway thin thing. And I'm really excited about it because it works. It works. And I'm pleased that I've kind of, if you like, role modeled what I'm talking about, because I've been brave and I've stepped out and said, no, I am going to do it like this. This is me. This feels real. And I know it's going to be of value. So let's do it. Let's do it.
It's kind of like Batman and Robin. I need to find my alter ego and find a sidekick now.
Oh, it's such good fun. Yeah, I'm really enjoying. Yeah, I look forward to that, Hank. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that there's a picture on your website with the crime scene tape, and you have to
Yeah.
see it. It's just funny. I love it. If folks want to get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, follow you, etc., how can my listeners do that?
Okay, well, I'd love everybody to connect or follow on LinkedIn, because that is my absolute top number one platform. I faff around on Twitter and Facebook, and lovely photos on Instagram, but LinkedIn is where the action is really. And also obviously my website, trishalewis.com, and it's SHA, because for some reason I went phonetic a few years ago when I thought it was trendy. I don't know why, but it's TRISHA, trishalewis.com. And yeah, and obviously subscribe to this blinking podcast. Everything's on my website anyway.
My blinking podcast. I love it. I appreciate you being on the show today. Folks, if you want to hear previous episodes, head over to hankhofmeyer.com/Alexa. I am on your Alexa device as well, which is why that URL exists. You can listen to me on iTunes, Google Play Store, Spotify, wherever you consume podcasts. We're also on YouTube, so check it out. My channel is just Hank Hofmeyer. This will be a YouTube video. I appreciate the support over there. Like and subscribe along the way. And until then, folks, find your alter ego.